Buried beneath decades of royal silence, one tiara held the secrets of sacrifice, scandal, and redemption. It belonged to Princess Alice of Battenberg, mother of Prince Philip, a woman once silenced by history but never broken. But now, in a move that has stunned European monarchies, her treasured Byzantine tiara has resurfaced, and it's headed straight for the most watched woman in Britain, Catherine, Princess of Wales. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The story of this tiara begins not in the drawing rooms of Buckingham Palace, but in the worn stone chapels of Greece, where Princess Alice, born deaf, misunderstood, and deeply spiritual, found herself exiled, impoverished, and yet defiantly regal. A descendant of Queen Victoria and mother to a future consort, Alice endured tragedy and displacement with a grace that defied her era. During World War II, while Europe tore itself apart, she hid Jewish families in her home, refusing to abandon Athens even when bombs fell around her. But it was during these final years in Greece that she commissioned something extraordinary, not for beauty, but for meaning. A tiara forged with Byzantine iconography, encrusted with ancient cross motifs and Greek-influenced sapphire inlays, a symbol of the spiritual resilience she carried when the world cast her aside. It wasn't made for court life. It was made for survival. After Alice's death in 1969, the tiara vanished from view. It was notably absent at Prince Philip's funeral, raising quiet suspicions. Where had it gone? Why wasn't it included among the royal jewels displayed during state events? For decades, there was only speculation. Some believed it had been buried with her, others that it was hidden within the Orthodox Church's sacred holdings. But one theory quietly gathered momentum, whispers that Philip, before his death, had separated the tiara from the crown's grasp and secured it for someone he believed would understand its burden. That person, shockingly, was not Camilla, nor even Anne but Catherine, Princess of Wales. While the reasons remained unspoken, insiders described private moments between Philip and Catherine during the final months of his life. Conversations marked by quiet reverence, exchanged letters, and, according to one royal aide, a decision that would honor the legacy of two women who never sought the spotlight. This re-emergence of the tiara isn't merely about inheritance, it's about symbolism. The Greek royal family, though no longer ruling, maintains deep ancestral and ceremonial ties to Britain. The resurfacing of Alice's crown has stirred fascination across Europe's remaining monarchies, many of whom still regard Alice as a spiritual icon of quiet resistance. And now, with the tiara en route to Catherine, questions abound. Why now? Why her? And who orchestrated this transfer behind the scenes? But if the re-emergence of Alice's tiara sent whispers through the corridors of power, nothing could prepare the monarchy for what would come next, a ceremonial presentation witnessed by the last royals of a fallen Greek throne. They arrived quietly, almost unannounced, members of Greece's defunct royal family, discreet, composed, and yet visibly moved. Their purpose was veiled in protocol, but beneath the layers of tradition, something extraordinary was unfolding. A cross-monarchy act of recognition, sealed not in paper but in jewels. While most eyes remained fixed on London, a motorcade slipped through the gates of Windsor under the cover of discretion. Prince Pavlos, heir to a throne long abolished, stepped onto British soil, not as a monarch, but as the guardian of a forgotten promise. Alongside him stood his sister, Princess Alexia, her expression unreadable but her presence unmistakably symbolic. They carried with them no press entourage, no fanfare, just centuries of history, loss, and unspoken reverence. Their arrival marked more than a visit, it was a statement. Though the Greek crown no longer held dominion, its legacy still echoed in the halls of Windsor, where the memory of Princess Alice had never truly faded. Queen Elizabeth had once described Alice as a soul forged in fire. The two had shared a rare bond, both as mothers-in-law and as monarchs shaped by duty and isolation. Before her passing, Elizabeth reportedly gave her word that Alice's tiara, steeped in sacrifice and spiritual meaning, would never fall into the wrong hands. That vow, buried in the secrecy of the royal household, now stirred to life, What no one anticipated, however, was that the true architect behind this moment wasn't the reigning monarch but Prince Philip himself. Long before his death, he had drafted a sealed directive, one not stored among official crown papers, but entrusted to the Greek royal family. It was Philip's express wish that, when the time was right, Pavlos would personally oversee the return of Alice's Byzantine tiara to the one woman he believed embodied its sacred legacy. That woman was Catherine. The handover was executed with military precision. Invitations were whispered rather than written. The time and location shifted repeatedly, and even senior aides were kept in the dark. The ceremony would take place inside the King George VI Memorial Chapel, sacred, sealed, and shielded from the press. But even the most carefully drawn plans could not contain what came next. In a twist that electrified the already tense atmosphere, Catherine appeared unannounced. Dressed in muted tones, accompanied by only a single aide, she stepped into the room moments before the tiara's presentation was due to begin. Her entrance drew audible gasps, even among the royals. It had not been disclosed to anyone, perhaps not even to Charles, that she would be present. Prince Pavlos approached her with solemn eyes, and without a word, offered a quiet bow. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. The political implications were instant. If Catherine was here, by private invitation, then someone had bypassed palace protocols. And more alarmingly, someone had the authority to do so. As whispers darted between the few gathered dignitaries, one aide was overheard murmuring, "This is not just an inheritance, it's a coronation in disguise." As the velvet case was finally brought into view, a hush fell upon the room. But it was what happened next, before the tiara even touched Catherine's hands, that would trigger a cascade of revelations no one expected. It wasn't part of the original plan, but when Prince Edward produced a handwritten letter in Prince Philip's distinct pen, everything shifted. For within its folds lay not just instructions but a confession, a legacy, and a final directive meant for one woman alone, Catherine. The letter was enclosed in an envelope no one recognized, not from the royal archives, nor from the crown's official vaults. It bore only a single marking Princess Alice's crest, faded and pressed in red wax. The room stilled as Edward, clearly emotional, approached the front of the chamber with the envelope in his hands. With a trembling breath, he broke the seal and unfolded the pages. Each stroke of Philip's handwriting, a living echo from a man who had, in his final years, withdrawn from the spotlight but never stopped orchestrating quiet revolutions. The words he read out were not ceremonial, they were piercingly personal. The faith Alice gave to Greece, Philip had written, "I entrust to Catherine to carry through the crown." The statement landed like thunder. In that single sentence, Philip had not only passed on a sacred object, he had passed on a mission. This was not just about a tiara. It was about a spiritual lineage that had bypassed kings and sons and landed squarely in the hands of a woman who had, until recently, remained in the background of royal strategy. Philip's letter did not mention Charles. It did not acknowledge Camilla. Instead, it carefully laid out his decision to sidestep direct succession and instead recognize Catherine as the rightful spiritual heir to Alice's unfinished mission, a phrase that carried more weight than anyone in the room could immediately process. That unfinished mission, as detailed in the letter, involved not statecraft or politics, but the moral and emotional restoration of royal dignity through service, humility, and unshakable purpose. The very virtues Alice had embodied while Europe crumbled around her. The silence in the chapel grew thick with emotion as Princess Anne slowly turned to Catherine and gave a single, solemn nod, one that seemed to seal an invisible pact between them. No words were exchanged, but everything changed in that moment. The tiara, placed now on a small ceremonial platform between the Greek and British royals, gleamed beneath the muted light. But Catherine didn't move toward it. She stood still, frozen in the weight of everything that had just been spoken. This wasn't a gift. It was a burden, a calling, a test. For a woman so often admired for her poise, her silence in that instant spoke volumes. She hesitated not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because taking that tiara meant accepting everything that came with it: the history, the conflict, the expectation, and the scrutiny. It meant stepping into a space no one could prepare her for. Yet before Catherine could lift the crown of a martyr, another voice broke the silence, a voice that hadn't spoken at Windsor in over a decade. Queen Sophia of Spain, born a Greek princess and Alice's goddaughter, hadn't spoken publicly of her aunt's legacy in decades. But now, in front of both British and Greek royals, she broke her silence not as a queen but as a witness to the love, pain, and exile that forged the tiara now entrusted to Catherine. Her voice, though aged by time, carried a resonance that cut through centuries of silence. Queen Sophia began not with formality, but with memory. She spoke of Alice not as a figure from royal lineage, but as a woman of profound faith who wandered war-torn streets of Athens wrapped not in robes but in threadbare garments, comforting the dying, sheltering the hunted, and praying in the language of the forsaken. She recalled how Alice, despite her ties to Britain, never once allowed her allegiance to monarchy to override her duty to humanity. And through it all, Sophia whispered, there was always the tiara not worn as a symbol of wealth, but as armor for the spirit. Alice wore it not to court, but to sanctuaries, as if to remind herself of what had once been and what could still be restored. It was, Sophia said, our last light when the lamps of Greece were being extinguished. The chamber remained silent, drawn into Sophia's words, as she spoke of the unbearable weight Alice carried, caught between two worlds, two cultures, two faiths, a woman who belonged to Britain by marriage, but to Greece by blood. Sophia confessed that her aunt struggled with that fracture until her final days, torn between the British Crown's reserved silence and the despair of her own displaced people. But then, her voice cracked with emotion as she revealed something that no one had known until that moment. A conversation she had with Alice weeks before her death, in which Alice spoke of a vision of a woman not born of Greece, but called to it. A woman, Alice said, who would bridge what we lost and make sacred what we could not carry. Alice never said her name, but Sophia admitted she had always suspected it. And now, seeing Catherine standing motionless before the tiara, she was certain. The room shifted as Queen Sophia stepped forward and slowly placed her hand over the tiara. She closed her eyes and whispered a blessing in Greek, words few understood, but whose weight settled across the royal chamber like a final rite. But even in that moment of quiet sanctity, a ripple of tension moved between her and Charles. Their eyes met briefly, wordlessly, and though no words were exchanged, the message was unmistakable. Sophia had taken a side. And it was not his. The gesture was subtle, but powerful. This was not just about inheritance, but allegiance. A crown of exile had now become a beacon for a future queen, and not the one the world had been told to expect. As the ancient blessing echoed through the chamber, an unsettling energy filled the air, especially for Queen Camilla, whose arrival at that very moment changed everything. No one expected her. Camilla's presence wasn't part of the ceremonial list, and yet she entered, dressed in court black, her face unreadable. Was it solidarity, or was it defiance? But her eyes locked with Catherine's, and the air grew ice cold. The atmosphere, already charged with emotion and ancestral weight, took a sharp turn the moment Camilla crossed the threshold. Flanked by two senior aides from Clarence House, her arrival sent murmurs rippling across the room like a dropped stone in still water. There was no formal announcement, no signal from the palace press office, just a sudden, deliberate presence. She neither bowed nor nodded to the Greek royals, which drew a subtle but unmistakable shift in their posture. The act, or lack thereof, was not simply a breach of courtesy, it was a message, and everyone understood it. Camilla's gaze moved quickly across the faces in the room, but it lingered longest on the velvet-lined case that held Alice's tiara. Her expression tightened. This was not a piece she had ever worn, and more tellingly, not one she had ever been offered. The silence was brittle as Camilla stepped forward and, in an unexpectedly measured tone, addressed the room. With a tight smile, she suggested that, perhaps, for preservation purposes, the Byzantine tiara should be placed under the care of the Royal Collection Trust. The room froze. Her words sounded generous, even reasonable, but the timing, the delivery, and the undercurrent of control laced in that proposal felt like a quiet attempt to reclaim authority. Prince Edward shifted uncomfortably, but it was Princess Anne who spoke first. Her voice was sharp, unwavering, and laced with barely masked irritation. "That decision," she said plainly, "has already been guided by the late Duke's instruction." The implication was clear. Camilla's interference was not only unwelcome, but out of place. Still, Camilla stood her ground, feigning diplomacy, her tone now wrapped in silk but laced with steel. Catherine had not yet spoken. All eyes turned to her, waiting for a signal, and after what felt like an eternity of loaded silence, she gave it. Calmly, with quiet dignity, she thanked Camilla for her concern, but affirmed that the tiara would remain in accordance with the directive issued by Prince Philip and blessed by the Greek royal family. Her words were few but final. There was no trace of arrogance, only resolve. It was the kind of restraint that doesn't provoke applause but commands silence. Camilla's shoulders stiffened. The rejection, though wrapped in grace, was unmistakable. For the first time in the ceremony, the hierarchy was no longer defined by title but by influence. But just as Catherine asserts her quiet authority, Princess Beatrice steps forward with a revelation that would throw the ceremony into emotional chaos. For years, Princess Beatrice had quietly been cataloguing royal archives, but buried in an untranslated bundle of papers in Greek, she had found something astonishing: a private diary from Princess Alice, with entries never seen by royal historians. And now, she was ready to read them aloud. The air was already thick with tension when Beatrice, her voice steady but unmistakably shaken, stepped forward, clutching the aged, leather-bound journal. She explained that it had arrived alongside diplomatic documents from Athens, an unremarkable delivery that only revealed its true weight when she noticed the initials etched faintly along the spine. Hidden between layers of bureaucratic filings was a diary, raw, reflective, written entirely in Alice's hand, never translated, never discussed. Until now. Beatrice turned to a bookmarked page and began to read. The first entry described Alice's wartime grief and her desire to forge a symbol that would outlive both monarchy and exile, a crown for the dispossessed. Not just a tiara, but a vessel of memory, a promise that those cast out would one day be restored through grace, not lineage. The next passage struck the room like thunder. Alice wrote of a dream one that had visited her near the end of her life. In it, she saw a future queen born not of Greece, but of grace, whose silence will speak louder than all thrones. The language was mystical, laden with meaning. But then came a phrase that drew a collective gasp. "She will bear the circle of sapphire, once broken by sorrow, now whole in healing." Beatrice paused. Every eye turned toward Catherine's left hand. The sapphire ring, once belonging to Diana, shimmered like a prophecy fulfilled. For years, royal watchers had assigned romance to that ring, but Alice had seen something else entirely. A lineage of pain reborn into purpose. The room fractured under the weight of the moment. Some stood frozen, while others shifted uncomfortably, unable to process what was unfolding. The implication wasn't subtle. Alice had foreseen Catherine's role not just as a wife or mother, but as a spiritual successor. As the only one capable of completing what Alice had started under the shadow of war and abandonment, Beatrice closed the journal softly, as if it were too sacred to be handled any longer. Then, with reverent hands, she extended it toward Catherine and asked her to read the final entry aloud. Catherine hesitated for just a breath. Her fingers touched the fragile page, and with a voice that carried both reverence and burden, she began to speak Alice's last words, words written in solitude, now echoing across generations. But as Catherine's voice carried Alice's final words into history, a storm gathered outside, both literal and political, for the Prime Minister had just been notified. As word leaked to Westminster of the tiara's formal inheritance by Catherine, senior government aides began expressing concern. Was this a ceremonial transfer or a subtle coronation? The crown's neutrality was being tested, and Parliament was watching with sharpened focus. Within hours of the ceremony, a discreet flurry of activity erupted behind closed doors. Confidential briefing documents were swiftly relayed from Buckingham Palace to Downing Street, marked urgent. Though they described the event as private and symbolic, the subtext was impossible to ignore. The Greek royals had arrived in official capacity. A sealed letter from Prince Philip had been read aloud. A spiritual blessing had been offered. And most unsettling of all, Catherine, without Charles or Camilla at her side, had received the tiara in full view of witnesses from 2 royal houses. Politicians weren't blind to the message this sent. To the public, it looked less like remembrance and more like elevation. Ministers began quietly inquiring whether such a gesture, particularly from a foreign royal house, constituted a breach of constitutional boundaries. Could one monarchy unilaterally endorse the future queen of another without parliamentary consultation? Was this inheritance legal under transnational heritage law, or did it fall into a grey area no one had foreseen? Beneath the legal queries, something more political stirred fear. Catherine had long enjoyed soaring popularity, but this event had elevated her to near mythic status. Online discourse was ablaze with speculation. Has Catherine already been chosen? Is Camilla being sidelined through ceremony? The fact that Camilla had been publicly rebuked and visibly excluded from the final blessing only intensified the noise. Meanwhile, palace press officers remained curiously muted, offering no clear interpretation of what had taken place. And Charles, stoic, watchful, increasingly weary, refused to make any public statement. That silence, deliberate or not, fanned the flames. Senior MPs, particularly from Scotland and Wales, began demanding clarity. If the monarchy was shifting its centre of gravity toward Catherine, they warned, the Crown would need to answer for it, not with vague ceremonial excuses, but with full transparency. Behind the scenes, constitutional scholars were consulted. Some argued the Crown was simply upholding a family legacy. Others weren't so sure. If Catherine was now seen not just as future queen by marriage but by symbolic ordination, then the monarchy was no longer waiting for the passage of time. It was, perhaps unknowingly, enacting a quiet transition in full view of the public. A new court of influence was emerging, not declared, but demonstrated. And that was more dangerous than any headline, because what Britain feared most wasn't the power it could see, it was the power that could be felt but never named. But while the political chessboard braced for its next move, one unexpected royal long silent sent a letter that reignited the emotional flame behind the tiara. The cameras didn't catch it, but later that night, a hand-delivered message arrived at the private Greek royal residence. It was from Prince William, addressed not to the royal family, but to Greece itself. His words? A stirring promise to honour Alice's legacy through Catherine's future role. While Parliament scrambled to manage the optics and whispers swirled through Britain's political corridors, Prince William chose a different path, one of quiet conviction. The letter he penned was not filled with diplomatic jargon or public relations polish. It was raw, personal, direct. In it, William spoke not as the heir to the throne, but as a grandson mourning the silence history imposed on Alice, and as a husband who had watched Catherine carry burdens never publicly acknowledged. He thanked the Greek people for allowing their sacred memory of Alice to return to Britain not in relics or relic-making, but in reverence. He praised the spiritual fortitude of Greece and the unwavering resilience of a woman who had lived among its people during their darkest hour. The world remembers queens and kings, William wrote. But Greece remembers saints, and my family has had the privilege of being touched by one. Then came the most arresting line. Through this tiara, he continued, my wife carries more than jewels, she carries devotion. The phrase reverberated through the halls of the Greek residence. It was not a reference to monarchy or power, but to sacrifice. Catherine's connection to Alice had never been forged through ceremony. It had been built quietly, through moments of reflection, through shared values of faith and duty. William's letter confirmed what many had only guessed. He, too, saw the tiara not as a political artifact, but as a spiritual inheritance. He vowed that the tiara would not be locked away in royal vaults, but would be displayed at select orthodox and cultural events that honoured Alice's memory. That it would travel, respectfully, as a symbol of unity between two royal traditions, one reigning, one fallen, but both rooted in legacy. The response was swift. The Greek royal family issued a rare public statement, praising the prince's words as a gesture of sincerity, humility, and historical understanding. For the first time since the ceremony, the media tone shifted. Headlines softened. Commentators who had questioned the ceremony's meaning now wondered whether something far deeper had been at play all along. Catherine was no longer merely the recipient of an heirloom. She had become the vessel of a mission her husband now vowed to help carry. But as the world began to process the emotional resonance of Catherine's inheritance, one final act remained. A mysterious sealed box, marked with Alice's sigil, was placed in her hands, unopened, until now. As the royal hall emptied and the cameras shut off, Catherine stood alone. In her hands, a sealed wooden box marked only by a faded sigil, Alice's private crest. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside were not riches, but something far more haunting and prophetic. The weight of the day had been unbearable already, but nothing could have prepared Catherine for what lay beneath the aged velvet lining of the box. Nestled inside was a second tiara, smaller, softer, and unlike any she had ever seen. It wasn't designed for public spectacle. It was a child's crown, delicate yet unmistakably regal. The detail was faint but precise, suggesting it had been made for Alice, during her earliest years, perhaps before war, before exile, before she ever knew what the world would demand of her. Next to it, folded neatly, was a single piece of parchment bearing Alice's handwriting. Catherine's hands shook as she read it aloud. The words were few, but they shattered the room's silence like glass. "For the future daughter of the woman who restores my name." The sentence seemed suspended in the air, its meaning both clear and utterly overwhelming. Catherine fell to her knees, overcome not with fear, but with a grief so profound it eclipsed language. Beatrice was the first to reach her, whispering her name, holding her hand. Then Anne, unwavering as ever, bent beside her, eyes glassed with a rare emotion she seldom allowed the world to see. In that moment, the true nature of the ceremony revealed itself. This had never been about jewels or titles. It had always been about legacy bloodlines that transcend biology, destinies that choose their bearer. Alice had seen something in Catherine, not as a daughter-in-law of the monarchy, but as a vessel for healing. And now, in the box's final revelation, she had extended that vision into the next generation. The implications struck deep. Was it a prophecy? A hope? Or something more? The message spoke not just to Catherine, but to a future that hadn't yet arrived. A child, a daughter, one who would continue what even Catherine might never complete. The child-sized tiara was not to be worn, not yet. It was a symbol, an anchor, a sacred trust passed from a woman who had been forgotten in life and resurrected in death. Without a word to the press, without ceremony or spectacle, the tiara was quietly transferred to Catherine's private vault. No photographs, no gallery placement, no announcement. It would remain unseen, waiting, because some heirlooms are not meant for history books, they are meant for destiny. And as the final echoes of Alice's words faded, a closing voice whispered across the screen. This was not a gift, it was a summons. And so, with a tiara forged in exile, blessed by blood, and sealed with prophecy, Catherine stepped deeper into a destiny she never asked for, but maybe the only one prepared to carry. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.